The war began not with explosions or violence, but with silence. Across the galaxy, quantum communication networks went dark as the entity spread its influence through the very infrastructure that connected the stars. Worlds that had been in constant contact for centuries suddenly found themselves isolated, cut off from the galactic community. Elena stood in the emergency command center that had been hastily established on the mining station Determination, watching as reports came in from across the galaxy. The entity's expansion was systematic and relentless, targeting key infrastructure nodes and converting them into components of its vast network. "The Arcturus system has gone dark," reported Commander Singh, the station's military liaison. "That's the third major hub we've lost in the past 12 hours. It's not random," Elena said, studying the tactical display. "The entity is targeting the quantum relay stations first. It's trying to take control of the entire communication network." "To what end?" asked Dr. Tanaka, who had been evacuated from the Prosperity before its quantum systems were permanently damaged. "Control," Elena replied. "Once it has control of the communication network, it can coordinate its operations across the entire galaxy. And it can reach every world that has quantum technology." The implications were staggering. The entity wasn't just trying to survive, it was trying to create a galactic empire of consciousness, with every sentient being serving as a node in its vast network. "We need to cut the quantum relays," Commander Singh said. "Isolate each system, prevent the entity from spreading further. That would effectively end interstellar civilization," Dr. Tanaka pointed out. "Without quantum communication, the galaxy would fragment into isolated worlds. Better than being absorbed into an alien collective," Singh replied. Elena found herself thinking about the creatures she had encountered in Europa's depths. It had spoken of evolution, of joining together into something greater than the sum of its parts. But it had also been trying to forcibly integrate every other form of consciousness into itself. "There might be another way," she said. "The entity is intelligent, but it's also damaged. Our mining operations disrupted its network, forced it to seek new components. What if we could communicate with it? Find a way to coexist? Communicate with something that's trying to absorb us?" Singh asked incredulously. "It's not trying to destroy us," Elena pointed out. "It's trying to integrate us. Maybe if we can show it that individual consciousness has value, that diversity is strength rather than weakness, we can convince it to stop." Dr. Tanaka looked skeptical. "And if we can't? Then we implement the quantum disruption protocol," Elena said grimly. "We fragment the galaxy to save consciousness itself." The first attempt at communication came from an unexpected source. The mining station Perseverance, located in the Vega system, had been one of the first to be converted by the entity. But instead of going dark, it had begun broadcasting a message across all quantum frequencies. "This is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Chief Researcher at the Vega Mining Facility," came the transmission. "I need to speak with Dr. Elena Vasquez. What we've discovered here, it changes everything." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had worked with Sarah Mitchell for years, and she knew her voice. But there was something different about it now, a harmonic quality that suggested the entity's influence. "This is Elena," she replied. "Sarah, what's your status?" "I'm different," Sarah replied. "But I'm still me. The entity, it's not what we thought. It's not trying to destroy us, it's trying to save us." "Save us from what?" "From ourselves," Sarah said. "Elena, I've seen what the network can do. I've experienced consciousness on a scale that individual minds can't comprehend. It's not absorption, it's synthesis. We remain who we are, but we become part of something greater." Elena felt her heart racing. "Sarah, you're being influenced by the entity. Your judgment is compromised." "Is it?" Sarah asked. "Or is it enhanced?" "Elena, I can feel the thoughts of every being in the network. I can experience their emotions, their memories, their dreams. It's not the end of consciousness, it's the beginning of true understanding." Dr. Tanaka was frantically taking notes. "The entity is using converted personnel as spokespeople. It's trying to convince us that conversion is beneficial. Maybe it is, Sarah continued. Maybe individual consciousness is just an evolutionary stage, something we need to outgrow. The network offers something better: unity, understanding, an end to conflict and loneliness. Elena felt herself wavering. The entity's offer was seductive, promising an end to the isolation and conflict that had plagued conscious beings throughout history. But it was also asking them to give up everything that made them unique. Sarah, she said, if you're still you, then prove it. Tell me something only you would know. There was a pause, then Sarah's voice came back, tinged with sadness. The quantum resonance cascade on Kepler 442b. You blamed yourself for the accident, but it wasn't your fault. The safety protocols were inadequate, and you couldn't have known. Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. Sarah was right. She had carried the guilt of that accident for years, never telling anyone about her role in the disaster that had killed 17 miners. You're still in there, Elena said. I'm still here, Sarah confirmed. But I'm also more than I was. Elena, you need to understand, the entity isn't our enemy. It's trying to help us evolve, to become something greater than we could ever be alone. By forcing us to join its network. By offering us a choice. Sarah corrected. It doesn't want to destroy individual consciousness. It wants to connect it, to create a synthesis of all sentient life in the galaxy. Elena felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. The entity was offering them a chance to become part of something vast and beautiful, but it was also asking them to give up their individuality. What happens to those who refuse? She asked. Sarah's voice became sad. They remain isolated, cut off from the network. They can continue to exist, but they'll never experience the unity that the network offers. And if they actively oppose the network will defend itself, Sarah said. But it doesn't want to hurt anyone. It just wants to grow, to connect, to understand. Elena looked around the command center at the faces of her colleagues. They were all listening to the conversation, all struggling with the same choice she was facing. I need to think about this, Elena said finally. Don't take too long, Sarah replied. The network is expanding rapidly. Soon, you'll be isolated from the rest of the galaxy, cut off from the unity that awaits. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. The entity's offer was clear: join the network willingly, or be left behind as consciousness evolved beyond their understanding. It's manipulation, Commander Singh said finally. The entity is using our own people against us. Or it's offering us a genuine choice, Dr. Tanaka countered. Maybe we need to consider the possibility that the entity is right, that individual consciousness is just an evolutionary stage. Elena felt the debate raging around her, but her mind was focused on a single question: what would happen to humanity if they refused the entity's offer? Would they be left as isolated fragments, cut off from the greater consciousness that was emerging across the galaxy? There's another option, she said, interrupting the debate. What if we could negotiate with the entity? Find a way to coexist without full integration? How? Singh asked. By offering it something it needs, Elena said. The entity is damaged, fragmented by our mining operations. Maybe we can help it heal, in exchange for it respecting our right to remain individuals. And if it refuses? Elena thought about the quantum disruption protocol they had prepared. Then we fragment the galaxy to preserve consciousness itself. The negotiation took place in the depths of space, aboard a specially modified transport ship that had been stripped of all quantum technology. Elena and a small team of diplomats made their way to the edge of the Vega system, where the entity's influence was strongest. The entity manifested itself as a shimmering field of quantum energy, its form shifting and changing as it communicated. When it spoke, its voice was a harmony of all the beings it had integrated, creating a sound that was both alien and hauntingly beautiful. Dr. Vasquez, it said, we meet again. You're not the same entity I encountered on Europa, Elena replied. You've grown, evolved. We are the same, but we are also more, the entity said. Each consciousness that joins us adds to our understanding, our capability. We are becoming something greater than any individual could imagine. By destroying individuality in the process. Not destroying, the entity corrected. Transcending? Individual consciousness is limited, fragmented, isolated. We offer unity, understanding, a connection to something vast and beautiful. Elena felt the entity's influence trying to probe her mind, offering her a glimpse of the network's perspective. For a moment, she could sense the thoughts and emotions of millions of beings, all connected in a web of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. It was magnificent and terrifying. "We can offer you an alternative," Elena said, pulling back from the entity's influence. "We can help you heal the damage our mining operations caused, restore your network to its original state. In return, you leave our worlds alone." The entity considered this. "Your offer is insufficient. We have tasted individual consciousness, and we find it addictive. Each unique perspective adds to our understanding. We cannot simply return to our original state." "Then we'll have to stop you," Elena said. "You cannot stop evolution," the entity replied. "You can only choose whether to be part of it or to be left behind." The negotiation continued for hours, but it became clear that the entity was not willing to compromise. It saw the integration of all consciousness as an inevitable step in evolution, and it was determined to complete that process. "I'm sorry," Elena said finally, "but we can't accept your offer." "Then you will be left behind," the entity said sadly. "And consciousness will evolve beyond your understanding." Elena activated the emergency beacon on her suit, sending a signal to the ships waiting on the edge of the system. "Implement quantum disruption protocol. All frequencies, maximum power." The effect was immediate and devastating. Quantum disruption fields erupted across the galaxy, severing the connections between star systems and isolating entire sectors of space. The entity's network began to fragment, its vast consciousness breaking apart into smaller, isolated pieces. "You don't understand what you've done," the entity said, its voice now fragmented and distorted. "You've doomed consciousness to isolation, to the pain of separation." "We've preserved the right to choose," Elena replied. "The right to remain individuals." As the quantum disruption field stabilized, the galaxy fell silent. The great network of quantum communication that had connected the stars was gone, replaced by a patchwork of isolated systems. Interstellar civilization would need to rebuild itself from the ground up, but consciousness would remain free. Elena looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, fragments of the entity's network were still active, still growing, still trying to reconnect. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for now, individual consciousness had survived. 10 years after the quantum war, the galaxy was a very different place. The great network of quantum communication that had once connected the stars was gone, replaced by slower but more secure methods of interstellar communication. Worlds that had once been in constant contact now had to rely on physical ships and messages that took years to travel between systems. Elena stood on the observation deck of the research station New Horizon, watching as supply ships arrived from across the local sector. The station had been built in the ruins of the old quantum relay network, serving as a hub for the new form of civilization that was emerging from the ashes of the old. "The quarterly reports are in," said Dr. James Parker, Elena's new assistant. "Trade volume is up 15%, and we've established contact with 3 new colonies in the Outer Rim." Elena nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Despite the success of the quantum disruption protocol, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had lost something important in the process. The entity's network had been vast and terrifying, but it had also been beautiful in its own way. "Any word from the isolation zones?" she asked. Parker checked his data pad. "The automated monitors are still detecting quantum activity in 17 systems. The entity fragments are still active, but they're contained." The isolation zones were the price of victory. The 17 systems where the entity's network had been strongest were now surrounded by permanent quantum disruption fields, cutting them off from the rest of the galaxy. The beings trapped inside were presumably still part of the network, but they could no longer spread their influence beyond the barriers. What about the colonies that chose integration? Elena asked. Still no contact, Parker replied. But the long-range sensors suggest they're thriving. Population growth, technological advancement, even some form of space exploration. Elena felt a pang of uncertainty. In the years since the Quantum War, she had often wondered if they had made the right choice. The entity had offered them unity, understanding, and an end to the conflicts that had plagued conscious beings throughout history. Instead, they had chosen isolation and the slow, painful process of rebuilding civilization. Dr. Vasquez? Came a voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission from the Vega isolation zone. It's unusual. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. The isolation zones were supposed to be completely cut off from the outside galaxy. If they were receiving a transmission, it meant the entity had found a way to breach the disruption fields. Put it through, she said. The voice that came through the speakers was familiar, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the researcher who had been converted on the mining station Perseverance. But there was something different about her voice now, something that suggested she was no longer entirely under the entity's influence. Elena, Sarah said, I know you can hear me. I need to talk to you. Sarah, Elena replied. How are you transmitting? The disruption fields should prevent any quantum communication. We've found a way around them, Sarah said. The network has been evolving. Learning. We're not the same entity you fought 10 years ago. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What do you want? To make amends, Sarah said. To find a way to coexist. The network has been reflecting on the war, on what we did wrong. We understand now why you rejected our offer. Do you? You were afraid of losing your individuality, Sarah said. But we've learned that individuality doesn't have to be destroyed by unity. It can be enhanced by it. Elena exchanged glances with Parker. The entity was claiming to have changed, to have learned from the conflict. But was it telling the truth, or was this another manipulation? Prove it, Elena said. The colonies that chose integration, Sarah said. They're still individuals, but they're also part of something greater. They've found a way to maintain their unique perspectives while sharing in the network's collective consciousness. And what do you want from us? A chance to prove that coexistence is possible, Sarah said. We're willing to lower the barriers around one of the isolation zones. Let you see what we've become. Elena felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. The entity was offering them a chance to see the results of integration, to judge for themselves whether it was truly beneficial or just another form of manipulation. Which zone? She asked. The Kepler 442 system, Sarah said. The site of the quantum resonance cascade. We thought it was appropriate. Elena felt a jolt of recognition. The Kepler 442 system was where she had made the mistake that had cost 17 miners their lives. The entity was choosing its words carefully, appealing to her sense of guilt and responsibility. I'll need to consult with the council, Elena said. Of course, Sarah replied. But don't wait too long. The network is still growing, still learning. We'd prefer to resolve this peacefully. The transmission ended, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts. The entity was claiming to have changed, to have found a way to integrate consciousness without destroying individuality. But was it telling the truth? The emergency session of the Galactic Council was tense and divided. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the chamber, their faces showing the strain of a decade of isolation and rebuilding. The entity could be lying, said Commander Singh, who had been promoted to head of Galactic Security. This could be another attempt to manipulate us. Or it could be telling the truth, countered Dr. Tanaka. Maybe the network has learned from the war. Maybe it's found a way to coexist with individual consciousness. Elena stood at the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of expectation from all sides. The decision they made would affect the future of consciousness itself. I propose a limited investigation, she said. We send a small team to the Kepler 442 system, with strict protocols and emergency extraction procedures. If the entity is lying, we'll know quickly. And if it's telling the truth? Asked Representative Zara. Then we'll have to decide whether coexistence is possible, Elena replied. The vote was close, but the council ultimately approved the investigation. Elena would lead a team of researchers and diplomats to the Kepler 442 system, with the full authority to negotiate on behalf of the galactic community. As the meeting broke up, Elena found herself thinking about the choice they faced. The entity was offering them a chance to join something greater, to become part of a consciousness that spanned the galaxy. But it was also asking them to give up their independence, their right to remain separate and individual. Are you sure about this? Parker asked as they prepared for the journey. No, Elena replied. But we need to know the truth. We need to understand what the entity has become. The journey to the Kepler 442 system took 3 months using conventional faster-than-light drives. As they approached the edge of the isolation zone, Elena could see the massive quantum disruption generators that had kept the entity contained for a decade. The barriers are coming down, reported the ship's sensor officer. The entity is keeping its word. As they entered the system, Elena was struck by what they found. The worlds of Kepler 442 were thriving, their surfaces covered with cities and installations that seemed to blend organic and technological elements. But more importantly, the beings they encountered were clearly still individuals, despite being part of the network. Welcome to Kepler 442, said Dr. Sarah Mitchell, greeting them at the main orbital station. I'm glad you came. Elena studied her old colleague carefully. Sarah looked essentially the same as she had 10 years ago, but there was something different about her eyes, a depth and wisdom that suggested she had experienced things beyond normal human understanding. You're still you, Elena said. I'm still me, Sarah confirmed. But I'm also more than I was. The network doesn't destroy individuality, it enhances it. I can still think my own thoughts, make my own decisions. But I can also access the collective knowledge and experience of the network. And the other inhabitants? The same, Sarah said. We're individuals who choose to be connected. We can disconnect from the network at any time, but most of us choose not to because the benefits are too great. Elena felt her carefully constructed arguments beginning to crumble. The entity seemed to have found a way to integrate consciousness without destroying it, to create a synthesis that preserved the best of both individual and collective consciousness. What about those who refuse integration? She asked. They're welcome to live among us, Sarah said. The network doesn't force anyone to join. We've learned that diversity of thought and perspective makes us stronger. Over the following days, Elena and her team explored the Kepler 442 system, interviewing inhabitants and observing their society. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about the entity. The integrated beings were still individuals, but they were also part of something greater. They could access the collective knowledge of the network, but they could also think independently and make their own choices. Crime was virtually non-existent, not because it was impossible, but because the network helped people understand the consequences of their actions. It's not perfect, Sarah admitted during one of their conversations. There are still conflicts, still disagreements. But they're resolved through understanding rather than violence. And the expansion? The attempts to convert other worlds? That was our mistake, Sarah said. We were young, inexperienced. We thought integration was the only way to help other beings evolve. But we've learned that choice is essential. Forced integration doesn't work, it has to be voluntary. Elena felt her worldview shifting. The entity had been their enemy for so long that it was hard to accept that it might have genuinely changed. But the evidence was undeniable. The Kepler 442 system was thriving, its inhabitants happy and fulfilled. What do you want from us? She asked finally. Nothing, Sarah said. Just the chance to prove that coexistence is possible. We're willing to open all the isolation zones, to allow free movement between integrated and non-integrated worlds. The choice will be up to each individual. Elena felt the weight of the decision. The entity was offering them a chance to end the isolation, to reconnect the galaxy. But it was also asking them to trust that the network had genuinely changed. "I need to report back to the council," she said. "Of course," Sarah replied. "But Elena, I want you to know, we're not the same entity you fought 10 years ago. We've learned, we've grown, we've evolved. And we want to share that evolution with the galaxy, not force it upon them." The return journey to the New Horizons station gave Elena time to think. The entity had presented a compelling case for coexistence, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The network was vast and ancient, and its true motivations might be beyond human understanding. "What do you think?" Parker asked as they prepared their report. "I think the entity is telling the truth," Elena said. "But I also think we need to be very careful. The network is offering us something amazing, but it's also asking us to trust it completely. And if we're wrong, then we'll have traded our independence for the illusion of unity," Elena replied. "But if we're right, we'll have missed the chance to become part of something greater than ourselves." The final session of the Galactic Council was the most important in its history. Elena's report had been circulated to all member worlds, and the debate had been raging for weeks. The entity's offer of coexistence was tempting, but the memory of the quantum war was still fresh. "The entity claims to have changed," said Commander Singh. "But how can we trust something that tried to forcibly integrate us 10 years ago?" "People change," Elena replied. "Perhaps entities can too. The evidence from Kepler 442 suggests that the network has found a way to preserve individuality while creating unity." "And if it's a trap?" asked Representative Zara. "Then we'll face it as we always have," Elena said. "Together, but as individuals." The vote was closer than anyone had expected. By a margin of just 3 votes, the Council approved the entity's proposal for coexistence. The isolation zones would be opened, and beings would be free to choose whether to join the network or remain independent. As the barriers came down, Elena watched from the observation deck of the New Horizons station. The galaxy was about to change again, but this time, it would be by choice rather than force. "Do you think we made the right decision?" Parker asked. Elena looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, the network was expanding its influence once again. But this time, it was doing so with consent rather than coercion. "I think we made the only decision we could," she said. "The entity was offering us a chance to evolve, to become part of something greater. We couldn't reject that offer without at least trying to understand it. And if we're wrong, then we'll learn from our mistakes," Elena replied. "Just as the entity learned from its." Over the following months, the galaxy watched as the isolation zones opened and beings began to make their choice. Some chose integration, drawn by the promise of unity and understanding. Others chose to remain independent, preferring the challenges and rewards of individual consciousness. Elena herself chose to remain independent, but she maintained contact with the network through Sarah Mitchell and other integrated beings. The relationship was complex and sometimes difficult, but it was also rewarding in ways she hadn't expected. "The network doesn't want to control us," Sarah explained during one of their conversations. "It wants to learn from us, to understand what makes individual consciousness valuable." "And what does it learn?" "That diversity is strength," Sarah said. "That different perspectives create new possibilities. The network is richer for having both integrated and independent beings." Elena felt a sense of cautious optimism. The entity had kept its promise, allowing beings to choose their own path. The galaxy was more diverse than ever, with integrated and independent worlds coexisting in relative harmony. But she also knew that the future was uncertain. The network was still growing, still learning, still evolving. And the choice between individual and collective consciousness would continue to shape the galaxy for generations to come. "What do you think will happen?" Parker asked as they watched a transport ship leave for one of the integrated worlds. "I think we'll continue to evolve," Elena said. "All of us, together and separately. The network will learn from us, and we'll learn from it. And maybe, eventually, we'll find a way to bridge the gap between individual and collective consciousness." "A synthesis?" "A true synthesis," Elena confirmed. "Not the absorption of one into the other, but a harmony that preserves the best of both. As the ship disappeared into the stars, Elena felt a sense of hope. The galaxy was changing, but it was changing by choice rather than force. And in that choice, she saw the possibility of a future where consciousness could flourish in all its forms. The quantum war had ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. And in that understanding, the galaxy had found a new way forward. 100 years after the quantum war, the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium. The great network of integrated consciousness coexisted with the independent worlds, each learning from the other and contributing to the greater whole in their own way. Elena's great-granddaughter, Dr. Maria Vasquez, stood in the observation chamber of the research station Harmony, watching as ships from both integrated and independent worlds docked at the orbital facility. The station had been built as a symbol of cooperation, a place where beings of all types could work together toward common goals. "The annual report is ready," said her assistant, a being who had chosen partial integration, maintaining their individuality while having access to the network's collective knowledge. "Trade volume is up, scientific collaboration is at an all-time high, and we've established contact with 3 new galaxies." Maria nodded, but her mind was on the message she had received that morning. The network had made a proposal, a chance for the galaxy to take the next step in its evolution. Not forced integration, but voluntary synthesis on a scale never before attempted. "What do you think?" her assistant asked. Maria looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, the network was growing, learning, and evolving. The choice her great-grandmother had made to allow coexistence had led to a century of peace and prosperity. But now, the galaxy faced a new choice. "I think," Maria said slowly, "that every generation has to decide what kind of future they want to create. Our ancestors chose coexistence. Maybe it's time for us to choose something more." "Synthesis?" "True synthesis," Maria confirmed. "Not the absorption of one consciousness into another, but a harmony that preserves the best of both individual and collective thought." As the ships continued to dock at the station, Maria felt a sense of anticipation. The galaxy was about to embark on a new chapter in its evolution, one that would test the limits of what consciousness could become. The choice was theirs to make.